Hey, this is Devin Sheets with Alpha Sound. I'd like to discuss why I think classical music is the hardest kind of music for live sound engineers to mix well. It has to do with the fact that we all pretty much know, subconsciously, what classical instruments, voices, and halls are supposed to sound like. There's a deep reference or standard in everyone's mind, and deviation from that quickly becomes noticeable and undesirable. But with most pop and rock music, except for a few special circumstances, the window of sonic acceptability is pretty wide. In fact, deviation can even be considered interesting and accepted as creative development. Here's an example using a snare drum. Now let's apply a few different EQs and see how they sound. Okay, so did any of the EQs strike you as obviously incorrect? Maybe, maybe not. If so, I'll bet that your friend wouldn't pick the same one. And guess what? I pulled a little trick on you anyway, because the original snare sample I played wasn't even the one without EQ. The third sample was actually the original recording. Unless you either built the snare drum yourself or have used it for a long time, you don't necessarily have a sense of its natural tone or the way it should sound or whatever. Or how about a guitar tone? Listen to this, and don't bother trying to guess which one is the original. I'm not going to tell you. Again, who's to say which one is better or which one is wrong? You don't like number 2 or number 3? Well, maybe you're just not that interesting. Professional guitar players on stage might have a bit more consensus, but the audience probably won't, and that's my point. But see, this isn't the case with something like a violin. Listen to this audio sample with the same EQs from the guitar clip, and this time I'm not trying to trick you. Now, I think the first and last samples, the originals, are the winner for most natural sounding. The others are just off. And based on my experience, most people would agree on this. The thing is, the original audio recording sounds most natural, not because it doesn't have any EQ whatsoever, but that it was probably EQ'd already by an accomplished engineer to sound most natural. That's why it sounds unnatural to just throw these EQs on top of it. Same goes for this oboe sample. Now, this poses a problem for most live sound engineers because, as I discussed in my video about system tuning, you need both vision and skill, in this case to be a good classical sound engineer as well. You need to have a clear idea in your head of what kind of sound you're going for even before you step up to the mixer, and then you need to have the technical skills and understanding of how to get there. Again, we all know what violins and oboes are supposed to sound like, or maybe it's better to say that it's pretty noticeable when things deviate. And as long as we're shooting for an authentic natural sound, whatever that means, there are very few circumstances where deviation is acceptable to the average listener. The problem is that sound engineers might not have the understanding of what EQ is and what it does in order to correct for deviances, or they don't know how to take that innate sense that we all share in common that something has deviated from where it should be, and then translate that into a clear sound engineering vision of what to do about it. And why would they? Most sound engineers mix pop and rock style music most of the time. And for the most part, to be quite honest, the window of sonic acceptability is wide enough in those genres that even terrible sound engineers who do absolutely random stuff at the mixer board, or maybe just don't do much at all because they're ignorant or even lazy, probably won't lose their jobs. Yeah, the audience would have had a better experience if the engineer had both vision and skill and all that good stuff. But the show wasn't ruined, and half the stuff they did didn't matter anyway, or was written off as interesting and creative. If you don't know what to do with a guitar EQ, and so you end up doing it differently every night on tour because you can't remember what you did last night, or you just like to tweak on things, as long as you don't destroy the show, it's just as likely that you'll be called out as a bumbling idiot as it is that you'll be hailed as an experimental genius. So that's pop music. Now, here's the problem with engineering for classical music. Most of the engineers who've been mixing for classical music have been doing it in situations where the main bulk of the sound energy is acoustic anyway, because the instruments all make perfectly good noise themselves, and you're in a hall designed to maximize the sound already. When amplification is used, it's either used very minimally or it's only used for things which essentially function like, or actually are, pop rock instruments, which require amplification in order to be heard at all, but again have a really wide window of sonic acceptability in most cases. When suddenly the symphony or choir decides to do an outdoor event, and their regular sound engineer is now in a situation where nearly 100% of the sound energy, with all its nuances and dynamic range, is completely reliant on their mixing decisions, it's often a total disaster. Even though they might have a much stronger vision than their rock and roll engineers do for what the music should sound like, they don't have the technical experience that other engineers have when it comes to riding the particular animal that is an outdoor PA system. And because of the generally minimalist approach to amplification in the classical world, they're likely to shy away from doing what might be truly necessary to get a good sound in that situation, since it feels extreme and overbearing. A lot of that is because in the pop rock world, innovation is generally applauded. Ooh, look at this new way to mic drums, or wow, I didn't know you could do sidechain compression like that. But in the classical world, there's a strong status quo for how to mic an orchestra, or what types of processing are allowed. A lot of these standards and methods come from the world of studio recording, where they have a strong theoretical basis. You put a flat or neutral microphone in front of an ensemble near the conductor's position, since that's the person making all of the important sonic decisions based on how it sounds to them, and you capture that ideal sound and then use as little processing as necessary to get it onto the record. And then, of course, the best way to listen to it would be to play it back on speakers that have a flat response and as little processing as possible, so that there's little or no alteration happening between what the performer did and what you hear. It's a nice idea, and a lot of it works in the studio environment. Otherwise, it wouldn't have become such a strong standard. Now, the studio predates the live sound industry, and most of these types of standards were developed before anyone tried amplifying classical music, especially outdoors. In fact, the technology required to do a good job outdoors has only existed for maybe 20 years or so. It's really the new kid on the block. And so when it came time to start doing it, many of the top engineers who got thrust into these positions often brought with them all of these tried and true theoretical methods and techniques from the recording industry. After all, isn't a live concert just a giant remote recording session without the recording? What works in the studio should work the same when you increase the size of the control room monitors by about 10,000%, right? Well, who knows? So the best bet is to just set it up in the theoretically correct way, and then whatever happens has to be right. In fact, as the thinking kind of goes, if I've set it up correctly and I don't particularly like what I'm hearing, then maybe I'm the one who needs adjustment. Maybe I don't know what sounds good. And so a lot of classical engineers have probably reshaped what they think sounds good based on what happens when you set up certain mics and speakers in a particularly correct fashion. As I also discussed in my video on system tuning, these engineers are in danger of shutting off their ears. As it gets worse, some won't even bother to listen to the sound at all. I'm not even kidding about this. There are lots of concert halls that have these tiny little enclosed rooms, sometimes not even in front of the speakers, and sometimes without even an opening to let the sound through, where the sound engineer either mixes the show on a small pair of studio monitors, or they just check the meters every now and then to see if there's signal passing through the system, and that's good enough. They simply trust that, well, since the setup is correct, the sound should be correct. Now, in reality, because of the minimalist approach in most classical settings, involving only a small number of area microphones not picking up anything too specifically, and the fact that most of the sound energy in a classical hall is actually coming from the instruments themselves anyway, the amplified sound might actually sound really bad if you could isolate it and just hear what was coming out of the speakers alone. But no one can really tell because it's such a small percentage of the total sound, and it's so highly masked by everything else that's going on, that as long as it doesn't destroy the show, the engineer gets to keep their job. But you put that engineer into a situation where what the audience hears is not only 100% reliant on their mixing decisions, but they're also not accustomed to actually listening to what the sound system is doing, and instead rely on their bag of standardized methods and procedures, which usually don't work on modern PA systems. It's the perfect storm for producing a lifeless, mediocre, stale sound. Now, I gotta say, one nice thing about using industry standard methods is that if anybody complains about your lifeless, mediocre, stale sound, you can hide behind the fact that what you're doing is the standard. Go away. Maybe the people complaining just don't know what correct sound sounds like. To me, this is highly problematic, not least because of the elitism it tends to foster. You end up with engineers and musicians, for that matter, who are far more interested in doing things correctly than doing what most pleases their audience. And this is often accompanied by an attitude which views the audience as needing to be taught rather than served. Hashtag not cool. But there's a ray of hope. In recent years, mostly because of the popularity of music for film, orchestras have had to begin hiring new and talented sound companies and engineers to amplify their performances, especially outdoors. Because as opposed to Beethoven or Brahms, where the rules and standards have a chokehold on the industry, these boundaries are sidestepped by movie soundtracks and other modern compositions, where the average listener is used to hearing them in cinemas and home theater systems and headphones, where the sound of otherwise classical instruments and genres has been highly augmented and often paired with pop and rock elements. In certain passages of intense cinematic music, the sonic profile is nearly identical to that of heavy metal rock, and no one's going to be satisfied with a sonic profile fit for an authentic performance of Mozart. In fact, given the choice, I'm not even sure Mozart would have been satisfied with it. But that's another topic. And so, look, the classical and pop worlds have had to come together and collaborate, learning from one another, and taking what's best from their relative disciplines and skill sets and forging what is essentially a new genre of classical music altogether, one that is highly reliant on the technology and the new and creative approaches by talented engineers, one that is interested in what people want to hear. The question isn't, am I doing this right, but rather, does it sound good? And yet still operating within the relatively narrow sonic window that classical instruments naturally frame. It's not complete chaos, not everything goes. It's an incredibly fine balance, and those engineers who achieve it are essentially super genius interdimensional unicorn-surfing aliens from the future, showing us the way forward. In another video, I'll discuss what a lot of these engineers are doing in these higher dimensions, but for now, if we want to surf a few unicorns, we're going to need to exercise a really specific audio muscle that hardly ever gets worked. It's the muscle that takes the current sound you're listening to and makes a negative imprint based on what about the sound has deviated from your innate sense of what things should sound like. In my video on system tuning, I offered a simple exercise which also applies here. You'll want to get an audio software program like Pro Tools or Logic and have a friend make up some EQ settings in a plugin and save them. Then, starting with something like pink noise, have your friend slap on an EQ setting that you can't see, and then you have to use another EQ to try to undo whatever your friend did. When you're done, compare your EQ and your friend's EQ and see if they're exactly opposite. Some plugins actually allow you to flip your EQ setting upside down, so it would be really easy to see how you did. Pay close attention to the times when your friend repeated the EQ setting and see if you corrected for it the same way each time. Take notice of problem areas where you consistently get it wrong. Have your friend focus more on those in the future. The next step would be to start playing recordings of classical instruments and music, and try again with your friend's EQs. An even more advanced way to go about things is to tell your friend what to do to correct for the EQ, instead of touching the plugin yourself. Oftentimes, we EQ things based on muscle memory from having grabbed the same knobs over and over, or based on how the stupid graph looks instead of actually listening. Tell your friend to bring down 5 kHz about 7 dB, about an octave wide, or boost 230 Hz with a narrow 3 dB spike, or whatever, without ever touching or even looking at the EQ. That's unicorn surfing right there. Don't be frustrated if after a few weeks or even months you aren't seeing a ton of improvement. This muscle can take years to develop and maintain. There are even some really great apps out there designed for this very purpose, but I won't mention any in particular unless they pay me millions of dollars. And of course, listen to classical music frequently. Find a friend who plays violin or oboe and ask if you can come over and just sit in front of them and maybe with your eyes closed and listen to the raw sound of the instrument while they practice or whatever. Hashtag not creepy. But seriously, how many hours have been spent by sound engineers trying different mic techniques with drums and guitar amps? And then they get a bassoon on stage and just drag over what was the guitar mic and just kind of put it somewhere out in front of the thing and then look like a deer in the headlights when someone asks if they can make it sound less nasally in the speakers. Don't be that person. Go practice your ear training and go find a bassoonist and experiment with mic placement. Get it right. The world needs more live sound engineers who can mix classical music, because it truly is the hardest kind of music to mix. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and follow our social media pages. It really lets us know that there's interest out there in hearing more about these topics. And hey, maybe even consider donating some money if you want to see more videos like this. Donation links are in the description. Or just hire us for your next classical gig. That'd be great. Happy mixing.